Hello and welcome to Bodyholic with D, episode number 27. My name is D. Katz Shachar and I am a public health promoter. I'm a fitness trainer with over 17 years of experience and I hold specializations in corrective exercise, women's fitness, and Pilates. I'm the founder and trainer of Bodyholic, the global health and fitness platform and community, and I'm the author of the book, Rip It Up for Good. This podcast is a part of my effort and mission as a public health professional because I believe that real science-based information and knowledge is power. And my job in this life is to empower you. I want you to have high and sustained energy throughout the day, and I want you to feel better than you have ever felt before, during, and after your workouts, in and out of your clothes, and not only physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. Today's podcast interview is with Parmjit Kaur, an entrepreneur, executive vice president at PMI Southern Nevada chapter, a member of the National Speakers Association, NSA, and patient advocate. I had the absolute privilege to talk to her about HSCT, hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, and its use in treating multiple sclerosis, MS. This discussion can be life-changing for MS patients, so I invite you to share this episode and get the message out there. On a more general note, Paramjit is such an inspiration. I feel a true warrior, and I believe that, in fact, anyone would enjoy and benefit from the energy, hope, and strength that she brings along with her. Enjoy. Welcome, Paramjit Kaur. I am so excited to have you here. I really, really am. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
It's really a pleasure, and I think everybody is going to see how much of a pleasure it is to have you in just a moment. Basically, we're here to really talk about specifically the hematopoietic. How do I say that?
It's funny. It's funny, Dee. I can never say that word correctly, no matter how much I practice. So it's a hematopoietic stem cell.
Okay, you actually said it. You said it better than any professor I've ever heard. The way you said the poi. So, and I've heard, I think I often hear hematopoietic or something like that.
Yeah,
anyway.
I've got many different versions.
Right. So, okay. So in my version, it's going to be hematopoietic in my version. Hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, and it's used to treating multiple sclerosis, MS. So this is really, really interesting to me because basically it's a treatment that is not meant for MS that happens to work very well for MS. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah. The treatment initially came out in the 1950s, and the treatment was initially done on leukemia patients. So a doctor initially had a group of patients that he tried the treatment on, and so the thought was that it would be for leukemia patients, and eventually they learned that the treatment also works for autoimmune diseases, specifically MS.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And can you basically expand a little bit on an overview for what we're going to call it HSCT from now on, and how it works as a treatment for MS?
Sure, absolutely. So HSCT, it's an intense chemotherapy treatment. So it's an intense chemotherapy treatment for MS, and the goal of HSCT, it aims to reset a patient's immune system by basically ablating it or wiping it out, and then regrowing it using a patient's own stem cells. The thought process behind HSCT is that for MS specifically, that the T and B cells in an MS patient's body have essentially gone rogue. And so those cells, I should say, need to be wiped out. And then the immune system, using chemotherapy, needs to be rebuilt. And the immune system has to start from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's mind-blowing, actually. right?
Yeah, yeah.
To really kind of grasp that. And it's also, would you mind saying a few words about yourself and why you know so much about it? And that's actually what's blowing my mind. And so maybe if you don't mind saying a few words, because I do know a little bit of the backstory.
Sure.
And what I'm thinking to myself right now is how incredibly brave you are.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you.
So if
Um,
you don't mind,
Sure, sure, absolutely. So I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis myself in 2008. So in 2008, I was diagnosed with MS. And at the time when I was diagnosed, treatment only came in injection form. So there were a lot of um, uh, um, therapies that were meant to suppress the immune system because the
mhm,
thought was that the immune system has essentially gone rogue and has started attacking the nervous system as if the nervous system is a foreign entity within the body. And
mhm,
so there were a lot of therapies at the time, a lot of treatments at the time that were meant to suppress my immune system. And I was on many of them. But unfortunately, a lot of these therapies, there's two things about these therapies. One, they only slowed down the progression. So there was no guarantee that these therapies would stop the progression of the MS. And on top of that, they had a myriad of side effects that included suicidal thoughts, side effects that included flu-like symptoms, and a lot of aches and pains. And so I was on medication for a number of years, but although I was on medication, my condition continued to deteriorate. And in 2016, my prognosis was that I more than likely would be in a wheelchair by the end of 2016, probably 2017.
no
Uh,
kidding.
and back then, just to give you an idea of just how dire my situation was, I couldn't even walk down a flight of stairs unless there was a railing to hold on to. There were just so many things. I couldn't ride a bike anymore. I couldn't run anymore. Forget about heels. Heels were completely out of the
Yep.
question. But
Mhm,
my condition was severely deteriorating, and I knew at the time that there had to be something else out there. And
mhm.
that is when another patient who had had HSCT, she actually was part of a trial done at Northwestern University Hospital in Chicago, pioneered by Dr. Richard Burt. She was part of that trial and she was a success story. And so she told me about HSCT, which I'd never heard about it.
She personally told you about it.
Yeah, she personally told me about it. And
How did you find her? How did you reach out to each other?
Sure, great question. So I am part of or I was a part of a huge MS community on Facebook. And so I had befriended, soon after my diagnosis, I joined a lot of support groups on Facebook, and she was part of one of those communities. And so she and I became pretty fond of each other. And so so every time I would end up in the hospital or I would get sick, I would post about it. I'm a very let me backtrack. I'm an open book. And so anytime I would get sick or I would go through something, I would post about it on Facebook. And so she saw my journey. She saw whenever I would end up in the emergency room or I would end up sick. And so as a friend, she recommended HSCT to me because she knew how much I was suffering and she knew the relief that HSCT provided.
Hmm. Wow. And so then, okay, you found out about it and then you turned to Northwestern, or was it offered elsewhere?
Yeah, it was offered elsewhere. So I did initially turn to Northwestern University Hospital. And so, but at
I'm
the
asking, I'm
time,
sorry. I'm really getting into the nitty gritty because
sure.
also I find it fascinating. Like I'm
Uh-huh.
going way off, topic of the questions that I had that are more technical.
No.
But I think that your journey is really, really important. And I think so many people can actually benefit from those steps. So I hope you don't mind that, that I'm
No,
going in. Okay.
no, not at all. Not at all. Feel free to pivot and go
Awesome.
in a different direction as you need to. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Yes, I was. I did initially apply to Northwestern University Hospital to be part of their clinical trial. But unfortunately, it wasn't that I wasn't accepted into the clinical trial. I could have been accepted, but I will be completely honest, I was afraid. My disability was progressing, and Northwestern University took a little bit of time in getting back to me.
Mhm.
And no fault of theirs. They just took a little bit of time getting back to me, and I was afraid because, again, I was watching my disability progress. And also, then I had the thought that what if I am not accepted into this clinical trial? I would then maybe have to seek my insurance company to cover the treatment. And at the time, not all insurance companies were covering the treatment because the treatment was not FDA approved.
Mhm.
And so, because of this, I started seeking other countries in which the treatment was taking place, and I happened to find Mexico. And in Puebla, Mexico, they were doing the treatment at a place called Clinica Ruiz. And Clinica Ruiz is run by Dr. Ruiz, who is one of the top 20 alumni out of Mayo Clinic. And so I started talking to other patients who had gone to Mexico for their treatment, and I
Mhm.
heard nothing but great things. And so I applied to Mexico as I'm waiting to hear back from Northwestern, and I got approved almost immediately.
Wow.
Uh, and so when I got approved, it was for me, it was without a second thought, I knew, okay, this Mexico is where I need to go.
Mhm. Mhm. So
Yeah.
you show up to Mexico, and you basically, and this is why I think you're so brave, you basically say, all right, I'm going to go for this well-known cancer treatment,
Hmm.
and that has been used for decades, and I'm just going to clean out my blood system basically and start from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then how long did that take? Like what was the process there? Did you have to move there for a while? What?
Yeah, I did. And great question. So I did. I had to move to Mexico for 28 days. So
Okay.
I was in Mexico, and I want to share the cost because there's of course a cost associated with it. So again, one of the reasons that I chose not to pursue HSCT in Chicago was number one, I was afraid that might not be accepted into the clinical trial, and the clinical trial was ending anyway. By the time I found out about it, the clinical trial was coming to an end. And two, I thought to myself, well, if I can't get so at the time I had just gotten laid off of work. And so I didn't have health insurance. And then I thought to myself, well, no, I don't have health insurance. So if I were to pay for this treatment out of pocket, the cost was upwards of $200,000. And I don't know about you, but I definitely did not have $200,000 laying around. And
Mm-hmm.
so in Mexico, they were doing the treatment at a fraction of that cost. And so the
Mm-hmm.
cost in Mexico at the time was 54,500. So
Wow.
once I knew I was going to go to Mexico, I started fundraising. Unfortunately, I did not fundraise as much as I'd hoped.
Mm-hmm.
So my father at the time had a life insurance policy, which he took out a loan against. And so he got me the money for the treatment. Um,
And it was worth every dollar.
oh my gosh. Absolutely. Hopefully I would never have to do it again. But if I had to do it all over again, I would absolutely do it all over again.
Is that even a possibility? I didn't
It
even know
could
that.
be. If so, it's not supposed you once you have the treatment, it's supposed to be a one and done. You're not supposed to ever have to need to get HSCT again. However,
Mm-hmm.
there are some patients that have had to get HSCT a second time because for whatever reason or for whatever circumstances, the MS has come back. So they have had to do a second course of treatment. I don't know the exact numbers as far as how many of those patients have had to, but personally, I've only heard of two patients who've had to redo it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Wow. And you're in touch with a lot. So,
I am. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And then are the side effects similar to, I mean, what we know as chemo?
Yeah, so some of the side effects include potentially other autoimmune diseases coming into play later on.
Mhm.
Menopause is also, yes. So let me actually backtrack. Losing your hair is another side effect.
Oh,
And
does that happen?
yeah, so the chemotherapy that is used for HSCT, it is very intense. I want to say that it might even be more intense than the chemotherapy that is used to treat cancer. But
Hmm.
it is a very rigorous form of chemotherapy. And so, yes, I did lose my hair almost immediately. My hair started falling out.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I did go completely bald. I did sport the GI Jane look for a little bit.
I'm sure you sported it beautifully.
Thank you, thank you. Um, and
And the
yeah,
nausea and
yeah, so nausea was absolutely a thing. And luckily, I think you asked earlier, how long was I in Mexico? So I was there for 28 days and I did have to take a caregiver with me.
okay.
Um, and so the good thing is, in
Mm.
Mexico, if you do not have a caregiver who can go with you for the entire month, they do offer caregivers that I think for a fee you could, I don't want to say rent because that's a human being I'm talking about, but adopt a caregiver in a sense, or you could utilize one of their caregivers.
Hmm.
So my youngest brother did go with me to Mexico for 28 days.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
and so every time that I got nauseous, and I got very, very nauseous while I was there. He is the one who cleaned up after me, the poor boy. He cleaned up after me, he cooked for me, and yeah, he was there with me for the entirety of that 28 days.
Wow. Wow. And then, and is that it just keeps bringing me, I keep like, we're so off track because the thing that's going through my mind is just like, that's such a brave, incredible move. And to just trust the system. You must have also trusted your friend, and just be like, okay, this is it. It also just makes me think how incredibly ineffective the other treatments were. Like it was, I don't know if you were dealing with the side effects you were talking about, the suicidal thoughts, and um, what was the other side effect you had specifically mentioned?
So a lot of pain, the flu-like symptoms.
Flu-like, right? Which sounds horrible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you experienced that, but it was so the deterioration together with side effects. I mean, it just sounds like rock bottom. Like that's what
Oh,
it sounds like. I don't know. I haven't been there.
oh, you're right on the money. It was. I did experience all of those side effects. So I did
Yeah.
have suicidal thoughts. I became severely depressed. I was sick every other day. So one of the first treatments I was on was something called Rebif. And Rebif, I had to inject myself. I think it was 3 times, if I remember correctly. It was 3 times a week I had to inject myself. And with each injection I got flu-like symptoms.
Hmm.
So if it felt like I had the full-on flu. And I was miserable. I was miserable. And if you spoke to any of those individuals in my life who know me and love me, they would tell you that I became a shell of myself. I think T, so you and I have met. I'm naturally a very happy,
Right.
bubbly person.
Right.
And but I didn't even recognize myself. I didn't recognize the person that I had become. So
Hmm.
side effects coupled with the deterioration of my body, I think that just threw me into this zombie-like catatonic mindset or state.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not even your mindset because that's almost like taking responsibility for that situation when really you're not responsible for that
Yeah,
situation.
great
You
point.
know,
Yeah.
it's wow. Wow. So let's zoom into the HSCT. HSCT because I mean, hearing what you had been through and then going for that and taking what seems to be, a brave leap, a risk, and then it working so incredibly well. I think, do you have a shirt that says HSCT?
I do. I do.
Oh, there you go.
I
And
do.
like you're sporting it. So let's maybe put the spotlight on that a little bit and talk about how did the idea come to apply the cancer treatment to MS, and what were the like major developments to the approach that made that actually happen?
Sure, absolutely. So I do want to share where this process started. So the first allogenic HSCT was actually pioneered by a gentleman by the name of Donald Thomas, and it was reported in the New England Journal of Medicine on in September of 1957. So this is how far back
Wow.
this goes. Yeah, and so the most important thing that Thomas found in his work was the power of the immune system to eradicate cancer. And so in 1990, actually, Mr. Thomas actually won a Nobel Peace Prize for his discoveries in stem cell transplantation in the treatment of human disease. So I just wanted to share that, just a little backstory of where HSCT actually started. And so in 1995, the first transplantation of hematopoietic, I'm going to flubber the word, hematopoietic stem cells was suggested as a treatment for MS after hypothesizing that an immune-mediated attack on myelin caused pathologic events in MS. And so, again, this was Mr. Donald Thomas, who at the time who pioneered this. And then HSCT at the time was clinically pursued in MS based on strong data that was obtained from mouse models, actually, mouse models that actually had autoimmune disease. And it was shown that these mice that had these autoimmune diseases suddenly or to have these severe autoimmune diseases, including MS, all of a sudden, these mice were, I'm trying to think of the exact word. I don't want to say cured because a cure is not the right word, but all of a sudden they were healing. They were healing. And that is what Mr. Thomas had found in a lot of his studies. And then so after him, I think if you will, the baton was passed. And I don't know at which point Dr. Richard Burt of Northwestern University Hospital in Chicago, I don't know at what point he started doing his studies into HSCT for MS, but here in the US after Thomas, I believe Dr. Burt was one of the pioneers, if not the pioneer, to pioneer HSCT for MS.
So basically, he got that from Thomas.
I believe so. I believe Thomas was the originator, and I may be incorrect in saying this.
But it's very interesting because it went from cancer treatment to mice to then testing it in the 1990s.
Yeah.
On humans.
Yeah.
So you talked about HSCT being having over 85% success rate in stopping the progression of MS.
Yeah.
Could you explain? So you did talk about the other treatments from MS, but I'm also interested in the fact that you were talking about the success rate in stopping the progression, but I've seen you, and I mean, when you talk about where you were, it sounds like it's more than stopping the progression, and yeah, can we talk about the potential benefits that like you didn't want to say cure. You didn't want to say
Yeah.
that, but it's almost like, can we get into that a little bit? Because it sounds far beyond, at least for you, far beyond just stopping the progression.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I went into this, when I got HSCT, I was told that HSCT is over 85% effective in stopping the progression of MS. I was also told that there is a chance that some of my symptoms or some of the disability that I'd incurred or that was prevalent might be reversed. And
Okay.
so, but that's not a guarantee. So again, I was told that the chances of stopping the progression, that's over 85%. There is a slight chance you will get reversal in symptoms, but there is no guarantee. I am one of the lucky few,
Okay.
or I don't want to say the lucky few, because there are actually many folks who have been fortunate, who have gotten reversal in symptoms. I was one of those individuals.
Okay.
So I went from, I made a joke about heels earlier on in this interview. I talk about not being able to wear heels, and anyone who knows me knows all I ever owned has been heels my whole life. And so after my MS progressed, I went from wearing 4-inch stilettos to wearing block heels to wearing wedges to not even being able to wear wedges anymore, to wearing flats and sneakers. And suddenly I
Mhm.
had to start, and I did at one point I started selling all of my high heels. I say all that to say I now am wearing heels again. I'm back to wearing 3 and 4 inch heels again. Um, I am now walking up and down flights of stairs without needing a railing, almost the way a person without MS might. We walk up and down a flight of stairs without giving it a second thought, right?
Right.
And that is how it used to be for me, until, of course, the MS progressed. But I'm now back to that state where I don't think twice about going up and down a flight of stairs. I have started riding a bike again. Uh, and
Really?
I and I mentioned this because riding a bike requires balance, and my balance was severely affected
Sure.
by the MS. So I've got a lot of my balance back. Um, I've also started running again. Didn't Never thought I would be able to run again.
Wow.
Yeah. And I even competed in my very first bodybuilding competition 1 year.
No.
Yes. 1 year after HSCT, I competed in my very first bodybuilding competition.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you. I think so. I am so grateful. Honestly, I'm just so grateful for this treatment because it has truthfully given me a second chance to at life, a second chance to
Oh
live.
my gosh.
Yeah.
I kept wanting to ask, and I was going to leave it for the end. I was like, do you work out? Do you work out? Like this thing in my head, like, do you work out?
Yeah.
And you just basically answered that. And wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. No,
That's
thank you.
amazing.
Thank you so much. And it's funny that you should ask that. So even when my MS was bad, I still worked out, but all of a sudden I was going into the gym with a cane instead,
Yeah.
and I was very self-conscious. And so things that I used to be able to do, like just walking on the treadmill without holding on to, the sides, I couldn't do that anymore.
Right, right.
And so I still
How
went to
old
the
were you when
gym.
you couldn't do that anymore? Can I ask?
Oh, sure. Gosh, they're about 32. I would say about 32. Yeah.
32, you were with a cane?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. This is
Yeah.
this is really like an incredible story. It's just an incredible story. And
Thank you.
seeing you and learning just now about the bodybuilding competition and the running and the bicycle. I mean, it's amazing.
It
Um,
truly is. Yeah.
yeah. Wow. Um, so for the patients out there who are listening or to family members who are listening, What are the main criteria that patients with MS should consider when evaluating HSCT as a treatment option? And are there any risks that you haven't mentioned or limitations that are associated? Because we did talk about it being chemo, and
Sure.
the response is what you'd expect the response to be to chemo. But anything further, and like, are there people who you would say, actually, I don't think HSCT is for you? If you can just elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure, absolutely. So HSCT, really, some of the criteria for a patient to be considered for HSCT is typically if that patient has primary and secondary progressive MS, as well as is it, UCI. I haven't had, and I can't, I don't use the word cure because HSCT is, it's not a cure necessarily, but I sometimes even forget the type of MS that I had. So RRMS, so that is the acronym I was looking for. So patients who have remitting relapsing MS, I would say every patient that has MS should pursue HSCT and at least apply. Now, what clinics like Clinica Ruiz and other places that are doing HSCT. So HSCT also is done in India, and I forget where else. But some of the criteria that I believe a lot of these doctors look for is they're looking for patients who have evidence of their disability getting worse in the previous 12 months or who show signs of active inflammation. And so the active inflammation is shown by new lesions on a MRI or having had a recent relapse. So so I'll use myself as an example. So even though I didn't have any, I did have active lesions, but I also was constantly relapsing despite being on medication. I was constantly relapsing. And so if a medication is not working for a patient and a patient is still relapsing and still has active lesions in their brain, that a patient would be a good candidate for HSCT. But I will also say a patient who maybe does not have active lesions should still pursue HSCT.
No kidding.
Because I think in some cases, they do still get accepted.
And you're saying that because if they don't have active lesions, what does that actually mean? Does that mean that they don't feel symptoms of MS?
No, not necessarily. So a patient can have an inactive lesion and still right. So like we've spoken about, I'm not a doctor. So I can't speak to it as eloquently, maybe as a physician or a hematologist or a neurologist might be able to. But typically, even if a patient has inactive lesions, they can still experience the symptoms of MS. There were times within my own diagnosis that I had inactive lesions, but in which I still experienced symptoms of MS, like balance issues, like muscle spasms and pain in my back and things of that nature.
Okay. So yeah, it doesn't, whether you have the active lesions or not, it could be a game changer.
Right. Absolutely.
So other than your story, which is just absolutely remarkable, are there any patient experiences, because you are connected to so many MS patients, are there any experiences of that you know of that have to do with HST being the treatment for MS that you would want to share briefly that have highlighted the positive outcomes? Anything that really stood out, even though I really think your story just stands out so much. But is there any other anecdote that you would want to share?
No, I would just want to share. So, of course, HSCT is great for MS. I also want to say, and this is going to sound so cliche. This is going to sound so cliche. A positive mindset makes all the difference. And I'm a believer in our cells. Our cells are listening to us. And
Mm-hmm.
when we introduce, and again, and I'm not a doctor, and so this is just my opinion and just what I've found over the years. When we are negative, and we have negative self-talk, we are introducing disease into our body because our cells are listening, and our nervous system is reacting. And so, talk a lot about having a positive mindset. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, again, that's cliche," and everybody says that, but the mind is a powerful thing, and not to say that a positive mindset is going to cure you of MS. I'm not saying that.
Right, of course.
Right, a positive mindset coupled with a good diet, uh, fruits and vegetables, um, and in addition to some form of exercise, whether it's weightlifting or aerobics or whatever a patient can handle. I think all of those things together, I think, create a perfect nucleus for healing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think HSCT is definitely the icing on the cake.
Oh, clear. Yeah. And I have to say, it might sound cliche, but there is also so much research now about meaning and purpose, and even positive relationships and how they affect our well-being and physical health, that it really is important, I think, to highlight that, and also look at the whole process as a complex process that has different components that really all have to take place in order for the healing to begin. Absolutely. And I think it's really important to highlight it, even if you say it again and again, and it might sound cliche to someone, that's okay. That's okay, because it really is that important, I believe.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I don't know if you've heard of the ACEs study, but the ACEs study, and I believe it was done by Kaiser Permanente, but again, I could be wrong. I might be misremembering. But the ACEs study took a group of patients and noted which group of patients had alcohol abuse factors in their home, which of these patients had sexual abuse in the home, which of these patients had domestic violence in the home. And it found, in following these patients, a lot of these patients over the long term, as they went into early adulthood, did develop chronic diseases and conditions. And without getting too much into it, I had all of those ACEs when I actually took part in. I actually was part of not this particular study, but I did an ACEs test, and I was evaluated, and all of those conditions or all of those factors were prevalent in my life, in my early adulthood, and lo and behold, I did develop an autoimmune disease later on in early adulthood. So again, all those stressors, our environmental stressors, and what we think about, it absolutely plays a part in the development of disease.
Yeah. You really do have an incredible story, and I hope that I get the privilege to have you back on, because you do have all kinds of angles that we can tackle together. But you really are a warrior, and yeah, like I don't even want to say survivor.
Yeah.
I feel like you're like, you're a warrior.
I appreciate that so very much. I'm humbled and I'm honored. So thank you for that.
As HSCT for MS does evolve. I'm assuming that it's continuing to evolve. What do you think, and what do you see as the future for the treatment for this approach? And is there any ongoing research and efforts that you know of? And yeah, I'm curious, even though you're not coming from the medical field per se, but you are very, very involved in the MS community, and specifically, you're a huge advocate for this type of treatment. So I did want to know a little bit about how you foresee the future.
Sure. And to be completely honest, I haven't delved too much into that, and I'm not privy to all of the information related to what work is being done to continue to explore HSCT as a treatment as an ongoing treatment for MS.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that it is eventually, if not already, going to eventually become FDA approved for a
Okay.
treatment for MS. I
Mm-hmm.
believe it's going to be much more widely recognized as an effective treatment. I mean, those drugs that, slowed down the progression of MS, those drugs are about 40% effective, whereas HSCT, the overwhelming data shows that it is over 85% effective in stopping the
Right.
progression of MS. And so I think more and more doctors, more and more neurologists are going to start recognizing it as an effective treatment. And so when a patient gets diagnosed, rather than be told, okay, here are your 4 or 5 MS drug options, I think providers hopefully will start saying, here are these 5 drug options that you can choose to take, or you can choose to go down the HSCT path because this is much more effective and completely stopping the progression of the disease. And I think not just here so of course, I'm based in Las Vegas here in the United States. I think it's going to be more widely recognized, not just here in the United States, but in other countries as it continues to be. As I mentioned, HSCT is being done in Russia currently. It's being done
Wow.
it's being done, I believe, in 2 places here in the US. It's being done in Mexico now. I got it done in Puebla, Mexico. It's now also being done in Monterrey, Mexico. And I think more and more countries and places around the world are going to recognize that this is the best course of treatment for somebody who is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So on that note, is there anything that you would want to add? Anything that you feel I may have missed?
No, I don't think so. But there is something that I want to add, and I definitely want to encourage patients. So when I was diagnosed with MS, even though I was going downhill, I still had remitting relapsing MS. And remitting relapsing MS is, I don't want to say, and I hate to put it this way, I don't want to say it's when your disability hasn't progressed that much yet.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to tell patients that even if you are doing fine and you might think, okay, well, I don't really have symptoms yet, and I have been in remission for this period of time, I haven't really had many relapses, so I don't need HSCT.
Mm-hmm.
I want to tell patients, get HSCT as soon as possible, because you don't want to wait until you are becoming more and more immobile or have more and more symptoms before you pursue HSCT. Because again, HSCT is not meant to reverse symptoms. That again is the cherry on top. If symptoms are reversed, great, but the thought is to stop the progression completely. So stop the progression. I encourage and urge patients to stop the progression via HSCT as soon as possible. So if you are early in your diagnosis, stop the progression before it gets to that point. I do also want to share my EDSS score. So the EDSS is a disability scale, and I'm going to give you the exact, let Oh, it would help if I had, okay, the EDSS stands for the Expanded Disability Status Scale. And so the higher a patient is on this scale, the more disabled a patient is. So my EDSS when I went to Mexico was a 4.5. That's how disabled I was. My EDSS today.
This is a 4.5 out of how much? Did you say?
I believe it is out. I wish I could tell you. I don't have that pulled up. I would have to look that up. I wish. I'm so sorry. I wish I had that.
No. That's okay.
Yeah. But my EDSS at the time when I got HSCT was 4.5. My EDSS now is between a 0 and a 1.
Okay.
Yeah. And I share that to say, and again, I got lucky in that a lot of my symptoms were reversed, but that is not always a guarantee. So again, I urge patients to pursue HSCT as soon as they can. And along with talking to your neurologist, I also encourage a patient to talk to a hematologist, because a hematologist is going to understand HSCT perhaps even better than maybe a neurologist would.
Very, very important. So a hematologist and a neurologist,
yes,
is highly recommended to get both of them on board. And of course, seek the doctor that fits you best, and second opinion, third opinion. I'm just going to expand a little bit, if you don't mind, that EDSS is a score out of 10, and specifically 4.5, just so that it's very clear to people who are new to this. Significant disability, but up most of the day, able to work, and may otherwise have some limitation of full activity, require assistance, and able to walk without aid for about 300 meters.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
It does. It does.
Okay. And then, I'm looking at these scores, and the higher we go towards 10, it gets pretty scary.
Yeah.
Yep. Very, very important information. Very important information. So I really can't thank you enough.
No,
for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me this platform to share my story and to get the word out about HSCT. I think the more people that know about it, the more people we can save. So I'm beyond grateful for this opportunity.
I really feel grateful as well. And you speak internationally regularly, and is there a way for people to reach out to you, like Instagram or LinkedIn, or something that you regularly can connect with people on?
Sure, absolutely. I would say I do have an Instagram, but my Instagram doesn't, it does talk about HSCT, but my Instagram is very silly. I have, silly videos on there. So folks can connect with me on Instagram. My handle on Instagram is stem cells _ the letter N as in Nancy _ dumbbells. So stem cells and dumbbells. My LinkedIn profile, it's my full name, Parmjit Kaur. But I would say either on my Instagram and or my LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me.
Amazing. And thank you for being so inspiring and for being so knowledgeable about everything that you've been through, so that you could actually share it with others. Really. And I really think you are just a star. I really think you're a star.
Oh, thank you so much. Again, I'm humbled, and it's truly my honor if I can help even just one person pursue HSCT and get their life back the way I did. It is an honor.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you for your mission. You and I are going to be in touch. I believe we're going to tackle other angles